I think you will hear from the speakers lessons of 9/11. Have we learned any? In my opinion, we have not, because the reaction of the Western world led by America after 9/11 was so huge. It started with the war from Afghanistan, Iraq, and now it is an unending war against many other countries, which is now at logjam in Syria. But I think it started with a very sad sort of thing, which was 9/11, but I don't think it needed that sort of reaction. Today we are here, and I have got speakers who will speak on this issue. But first of all, I want to thank you for coming here, but I want to have a big thank to Dave Anderson, who is always taken out time from his busy schedule to be with us. And I want to hand over to Dave Anderson with a big welcome from you all and
Thank you, Mushtaq. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave Anderson. I'm the chairman of this all-party group. I'm a member of Parliament for Blair, which is the North East of England. I'm keeping an eye on the TV screen because I'm not sure if there's going to be a vote tonight, because the debate is about the humanitarian efforts, or the lack of it, in the Middle East at this moment in time. And we're not sure whether the Conservative government is going to agree to the motion or not. They said they weren't. Now we're getting feedback in the April. I don't know where you were on 9/11, but I can remember very, very clearly where I was. I was on the platform of the Trade Union Council conference in Brighton, and we were waiting for Tony Blair to come and speak to the trade unions. We had a lot to say to him because we weren't very happy with his approach on a vast number of issues that applied to working people in the country. On the lunch break, we went downstairs in total ignorance of what had been going on in New York, Washington, Pennsylvania. And people standing around TV sets trying to get their head around what's going on there. So we went back upstairs to wait for Tony Blair to come and speak to us. We were in a state of semi-shock. And as we were sitting there, Tony Blair came through the back of the room, and he walked past my shoulder to the microphone. And a friend of mine who was a member of Parliament said to me, "Dave, what's happening?" I don't know where it came from, but I said, this could be the start of World War III. And sadly, I think I was wrong. Because I think we may well be seeing that as the start of what could still be a world war. But not a world war in the sense that we've become sadly used to in the last century. But at least you knew who you were fighting. You could do horrendous things like drop atomic bombs on cities, or race to the ground, or lock people up in concentration camps. Those options don't seem, as horrendous as they are, don't seem options today. That if any of those happened, would it stop what's going on the various combatants, the different people engaged in the terrible scenes we're seeing around the world. Mushtaq, of course, said it started at 9/11. We know that. I know he didn't mean this in the sense he did. It didn't start at 9/11. We know there's a long, long tail to this. We've got representatives here from Palestine. We know going back, God, it's the best part of the century now, to the creation of the Palestinian state, the creation of the maps that were drawn in the aftermath of World War I, all played their part in getting us to where we are today. And sadly, I think the answer is, at the moment, we haven't really learned the lessons. I think a lot of us are sadly disappointed with the leadership that has been lacking so much in the world over the last decade. In particular, I would say, for the man who came into this international arena with so much hope, President Obama. A man who was given the Nobel Peace Prize before he even sat down in his chair almost. You've got to see what great contribution has he made. He withdrew his troops from Iraq, which everybody applauded, but he didn't leave behind anything like a peaceful situation. And clearly his country, and ours to a lesser extent, was still doing an extent far too much, still engaged in that part of the world. So it's actually quite a somber occasion here tonight, and this thing's why my mind goes back to 4 years ago when we had a meeting out in the west of London, Mushtaq organised. It was to commemorate the 10th anniversary. And on that night, we had a colleague from Pakistan, and I didn't realise this, and what he said was, for all that had gone on, all the stuff in Iraq and all the stuff in other parts of the world, very, very little was mentioned at that time about what was happening in Pakistan. And 35,000 innocent people have died in a number of, an unaccountable number of incidents. And to me, things like that have been the almost secret side of the aftermath of 9/11. And that sort of thing needs explained to people of the world, because there's so much going on as a result of the actions that were taken, the crass actions that were taken in the aftermath of 9/11, that the vast majority of the population of this country and the vast majority of the population of the world haven't got a grips with. I think that's part and parcel of our responsibility as people who want to take a lead in this country and in international affairs. We've got to explain to people. So hopefully we can have some discussions tonight, hear what people have to say, that the experience of these people on the platform bring much more experience than me in their various fields, and we can hope that we have this meeting this time next year, that we are in a better position than we are this year. Because if we give one hope, then we might as well all just finally give up altogether. So, on some report, I introduce the first speaker. The first speaker is Dr. Chima, who is an educationalist, an historian, and a public speaker. He's a PhD in International Relations from the University of Gloucestershire. He's the author of 3 books and 24 research papers. In 2015, he's been selected as an expert witness at the United States Congress. He's a member of the British Association of Journalists, and he writes his blog regularly on CN. Dr. Chima. That's good again. Thank you.
Today is a very significant day. One reason is that for me, the British values, they we are celebrating, Queen being the longest monarch of Britain. But more significant is that we are reaching the anniversary of 9/11 in another two days, because Americans came in a different way than us. So it's 11th of September and not 9th of September. So in 2 days' time, we'll be commemorating anniversary of 9/11, which is very relevant to the British Parliament, very much relevant to the British public, because 9/11 was a day when most of the British lives, 67 in one single terrorist attacks, were lost. But more significance of 9/11 and relevance to this Parliament is that this is the Parliament which was misled to overreact as a response of 9/11. This was the Parliament which was deceived to start a policy of overreaction, of invasion to Afghanistan, to Iraq. And still today, we are bearing the consequences of that overreaction. I think as an academic, I really feel that now we have a consensus that the United States really overreacted on 9/11. They invaded Afghanistan, Iraq, preemptive strikes, but those preemptive strikes have not brought any fruitful result. I don't feel, it's my personal opinion, that world is any safer after the attacks. Rather, the world has become more vulnerable to extremist activities, more vulnerable to radical ideologies, because we have created a gap of leadership. I was meeting Archbishop of Canterbury a few months back, and he has said a wonderful thing which I would like to quote. He said, whenever I meet politicians, I tell them, don't create the vacuum of leadership in the regions, because vacuums will always be filled with nothing else but extreme. And this is what actually has happened post 9/11. Now, I don't know that when this very Parliament will allow that the public inquiry report on Iraq will be made public, People have vetoed it. People have sought judgment from the court that it shouldn't be released to British public. But in order for us to learn any lessons from 9/11, it is very significant that we and this Parliament accept the mistakes we did in the past and shouldn't repeat those mistakes again. But it could only be done if we accept those. The second thing which we haven't learned as a community is that we are not resilient communities. We are not confronting those extremist ideology which has created 9/11. I hear all sorts of conspiracy theories. America did it itself, CIA was behind it, and a very particular religion and their representative were behind this. Let's not give it so much importance. These are just the conspiracy theories. I visit United States off and on, and I work in one of the congressional caucus there. And anyone who understands the United States, its political system, and how things are authorized, would tell you the same thing. It wasn't a false flag operation. It wasn't an insider's job. So we need to come out of this mentality of this conspiracy theories. We really need to confront those radicals which are still within our lines. This is the biggest lesson we need to learn, that the people who misrepresent the faith of Islam, the people who misrepresent the peacefulness of this religion, the people who are talking about a theology or core text of Islam which is not relevant in today's world, the people who will quote the verses of the war, the people who will talk about the kafir, the people who think that you can behead someone, those are the people who misrepresent this peaceful religion of Islam, and we need to confront those. But we don't do that. We say Islam is a religion of peace. Yes, it is. But when we're going to teach this to our youngsters, when the role of the faith and the places of faith and places of worship will be changed in this country, when we learn this lesson that we need to connect our youth with the true spirit of this religion, so they don't leave for Syria, they don't go out and do the things which will have vital implications for Muslims, not only in this country, but around the world. And this is the lesson we need to learn. Second thing, I think for the governments, the lesson which needs to be learned and which hasn't been learned. Britain, US, big powers, they talk about democratic values. They are the torchbearers of liberty, democracy, but I think this approach is not consistent. I do know that these governments support some regimes which are totalitarian regimes, which are the regimes of the kings, and why we don't promote democracy there? Where these people have come from, who has done this? They were not from Iraq, they were not from Pakistan, they were not from Afghanistan, they were from Saudi Arabia and from Egypt, which were the very friendly nations to US, to UK and the modern world. But it sent a clear message out that you may have some quote-unquote friendly nations, and you may have some quote-unquote friendly kings and monarchs, but their very oppressed nation will not be friendly to you if you want to promote the democracy, if you want to promote the liberal values amongst those nations. And I think, because I have a background from Pakistan, my country, or country of my religion, is the worst victim of post 9/11, because there was a war imposed next door, which wasn't our war in the beginning, but we had to fight it. And today we are the worst victim of it. Our economy is ruined, and Pakistan has come to a point of failure, but it's good that now they are confronting it. Therefore, people should really think before invading the territories. And I think this politics of fear should finish. I think we haven't learned any lesson when it comes to parliamentarians or the governments. People are still trying to play the politics of fear, us against them, Islam, West, extremism, Islamic extremism. I want to tell you one thing, extremism is just extremism. It's not Islamic, it's not Jewish, it's not Christian extremism. And we don't have any standards to tag people. We say if someone do a silly thing anyway, and if he has a Muslim name, then it becomes an Islamic extremism. But if someone kills 73 innocent people in this continent of Europe, in Norway, and declares himself a Christian crusader, that's an individual act. If someone burns Quran, that's an individual act. So we should set up a formula. Either put everything on individual acts or don't malign other religion. I think I visit various parts of the world. There is at the moment across the board a strategy that Muslims should be kept on toes. The Muslims should always be made apologetic. The Muslims should always be complacent Muslims. But we need to understand, Islamic ideology has nothing to do with extremism. It is being misrepresented by the radicals. But if you have complacent Muslims, if you have Muslims who are always on their toes, if you don't have confident Muslims, they will not be able to confront these radicals. Because the bad people in this religion cannot be confronted by the governments that effectively as much as it could be confronted by this very community. So this very community of Muslims needs to be supported if we want to achieve anything. Another approach, another lesson we haven't learned, that the governments in the modern world think today that peace could be contracted. You can have one or two people who are so-called community representatives. You can pour money in, you can give them easy money, flood the money into the basic places of worship, have few nice faces who wear the cloak of Islam and who looks very, very Muslimic. Work with them and you will achieve peace. Peace cannot be contracted. You have to work with the grassroots. And I was wondering in the present days, Baroness, that the current government is actually supporting ex-radicals who were speaking about various things which comes under hate speech. They were talking about all sort of radical ideologies in the days to pass. But these days they are advisor of the current government and they have been contracted to have a community cohesion. I don't know how it's going to work for this community of Muslims. In the end, I would just like to conclude with one thing, that we are a community, and it's the community which fight terrorism. It's the community which fight radicalism. And the concept of community, my Prophet whom I follow, Muhammad, peace be upon him, has given us that when people live together, whether they are Jews, whether they are Christians, whether they are Muslims, they are one community. And this is what Muhammad, peace be upon him, practiced in the city-state of Medina, where he very peacefully lived with the Jews of Medina, where he signed a treaty of peace with Christians, and where he protected everyone who was living in that state very peacefully. So that is the concept of community Muslims need to adopt if we want to learn anything from these incidents. And in the end, my conclusion, we haven't learned much from 9/11. People are still dividing people. People are still playing the game of us against them. People are still not confronting the radicals amongst our lines. And if we want to learn these lessons, we will be dealing with the events and not the causes. And that's not a proper approach to deal with incidents like 9/11. And thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do have to go and vote, so that's much time if we can take the chair. Before I do, can I thank Dr. Chairman for our contribution and introduce His Excellency Professor Michael Hassassine, who was spoke this way often before. He's a Delegate General for Palestine, and obviously he's got very, very close understanding issues in that part of the world. So,
Wait for 2 moments. because it will ring again, I want to welcome a few people. I think Patricia Willie is sitting there. She's a specialist. Here it comes. She's a specialist in Amnesty International on human rights in East Africa. I welcome Dr. Trevor Truman, who's done a lot of work on Ethiopia refugees in Kenya, and Kifale and his colleagues there who are from Ethiopia. So I welcome everybody, but you were left because I know you were coming and you were a bit late. When it ends, you can start. And I also welcome a representative of Pakistan High Commission, Hassan Rabbani, who's a bit late. And Sandra and Yasser Abbas, when this bell ends, you start talking.
Of course.
I know it comes twice. Professor Hassan from Palestine.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I remember I gave a speech last year on the same topic. So excuse me if I'm redundant, but usually I'm not redundant in my speeches. And I just came here after I listened to our previous speaker, who gave us good insights about the lessons to be learned from 9/11. And usually I don't prepare my speeches. I like basically to speak from the heart. Palestinians are very warm people. We are very close to humanity, so we speak from our heart. That's why I might sound passionate to you, but not angry. And there is a big difference between being angry and passionate. Let me start by this. There is a lot of confusion in the world. And this is because of the lack of education and lack of awareness. That there is a draconian difference between Muslims and Islam. And me as a Christian, I can be the best advocate of Islam because I know to what extent the three monotheistic religions are complementary to each other. So if I cite anything from the Bible, definitely it's there found in Islam. One important factor that is common to all is the fact that there is respect for human rights and there is respect for individuals. And people have the right to express their opinions. It is so unfortunate sometimes that you mix ideology with politics. And that makes it really worse when we try to look at things how they unfold themselves in the course of history. Muslims don't usually represent Islam. Islam as a religion is a great religion. It's a religion of tolerance. It's a way of life. We have seen many values in Islam that preceded what we call the ideology of democracy and liberalism. Why do we talk about liberalism and democracy if we have such a great religion like Islam that deals with every aspect of individual human rights and respect? So we don't need to be intolerant, but we are tolerant as Muslims to each other and to other religions. And that's why, we call Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that he is the seal of all prophets. He came to complement other religions. Therefore, the perfection lies in the last religion, which is Islam. So I'm not here advocating Islam as much as to talk about Islam and how Islam has been abused by Western countries to the point that they could justify their presence in the Middle East, and their geostrategic interest in the Middle East lies in a certain fact where they have to justify it. And that justification came because some indignant Muslims who use Islam as a facade to give them the excuse for what we call modern day crusade, mushtaq. And that's why we should not fall in that trap. I remember vividly after September 11 or 9/11, that particular year I went and gave my usual lectures at the University of Maryland, College Park. And I was petrified from fear how these people are going to look at me as a Palestinian professor, regardless that I'm Christian, Catholic, and what have you, to talk about the challenges of Westernization to the concept of Islam as a theology and as a practice. So I was really scared to see the overreaction of these youth who are in the university waiting, earnestly to hear what this professor is going to do and how is he going to justify the terrorism of Islam. To my surprise, when I started by saying that the essence of September 11 is not those radical Muslim Saudis who committed the act. We have to see the objective reasons that led to these radical Muslim Saudis to embark on such a horrendous act in killing civilian people. And I remember vividly, when September 11 happened, I was the dean of the University of Bethlehem. I was the president, actually. And I was surprised to see my students holding vigils against those who have died as a result of September 11. If that portrays something, it portrays that we are human beings. Nobody condones terrorism. Nobody wants to see innocent people dying. But actually, we need to find the root cause for such behavior. I'm not interested in the result, but I'm interested in the root causes that led to those results. So we need to address those issues that lead basically to such overreaction, whether by the United States or by those who have inflicted, these terroristic acts on innocent people. The United States of America cannot really, with its values of democracy and liberalism, fool the world, ladies and gentlemen. And we cannot really accept the United States preaching democracy while it is considered to be one of the racist countries in the world. We have to call a spade a spade. And here I'm not talking as representative of the Palestinian people, but I'm talking to you as a professor who is learning from history and trying to deduce lessons from history in order to rectify the wrongdoings of governments that have to bear the responsibility for such overreactions. The United States of America is not interested in educating the Muslims in the Arab world to become liberal and democrats. The United States of America is interested in its geostrategic interests, in controlling the oil, in supporting the state of Israel under the banner of the bastion of democracy. And how could that be a democracy while an occupier of people for the last almost 60 years now? How could the United States of America sell me the idea of democracy while they are supporting Israel with the most sophisticated weapons to inflict naked aggression against our people in Gaza and in the West Bank? So let us not, be fooled by these ideologies of democracy and liberalism and what have you. Maybe these were the culmination of 300 years of slavery in Europe when the French Revolution in 1789 took place and came to the fore with such ideas to their own people. But there is no democracy in Israel for the Palestinians. There is democracy for the Jews in Israel. And you have to make clear distinction between how democracy is being manipulated as an ideology to justify, certain political interests. So the United States of America bears the responsibility of September 11. Well, I do agree with you, Professor, that we should not really succumb to conspiracy theories. But if you look objectively at the United States foreign policy in the Middle East, since Eisenhower until now, for 5 or 6 decades, the United States have not changed its 4 pillars, or what we call U.S. cornerstones in foreign policy in the Middle East. One is to control the oil fields and the prices of oil. Second, to make sure that Israel is the strongest country in the Middle East because they have, with the British in 1907, planted that strange body in the Middle East, the Zionists, which is a colonial settler movement, extracting the people of Palestine and building their own colonies, and to make sure that there will never be unity between the Mashriq and the Maghrib in the Middle East, and to continue as a source a negative source for not letting these people to develop, because they know once this region is united, it becomes a power to reckon with. So it's not an idea of Islam versus democracy, clash of civilizations. I hate those perceptions that when they talk about, clash of civilizations, there is no clash of civilizations. We are human beings at the end of the game. We have to understand that there are human values in our religions too. I don't need an American to teach me about the respect of human rights, about the respect of women, about the respects of democracy. Yes, we don't have democracy the way the West perceives it, but yes, in Islam, we have a different kind of democracy. We call it shurocracy, shura. We don't believe in nation states, because nation states are the creation of Western ideologies. You, Professor, mentioned Ummah. We are for the Islamic Ummah. We're not for Saudis, Palestinians, Syrians, Lebanese, Tunisians. Who created all these names and dissected the region into spheres of influence in order to be controlled through Sykes-Picot and through Balfour Declaration and what have you? The British played a significant role in that. Let's not forget that. But the Americans are latecomers. And the Americans now are the instruments of creating instability in the Middle East. If you think that the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq is to create stability in the region, then we are fooling ourselves. The United States wants to keep this region embroiled in regional conflicts as long as they can, because the ideology of divide and rule still reigns supreme in the foreign policy of the United States. And the third factor is to fight any kind of leftist or socialist ideas in the Middle East. And fourthly, to make sure that they will support surrogate regimes. And when we talk about September 11 and the ensuing years of what is called the Arab Spring or the Arab Winter, I hate to even name it, where people think that we are witnessing revolutions. These are not revolutions, ladies and gentlemen. A revolution is a social revolution when you change the conceptions, your perceptions, your ideas, your values. These are called uprisings. Uprisings against tyranny, uprisings against failure of secularism in the Middle East, uprisings against those regimes that were supported by the United States. And of course, the United States, when they realized that these regimes are failing, they sided with the opposition. And they're trying to create alternative leadership by concocting alternative leaderships in the Middle East. But in the final analysis, we have not witnessed potential opposition to these secular regimes, because the other option was fundamental Islam. And fundamental Islam cannot really reign supreme today with the modern day of development. Because if you want to go back to the time of Al-Rasul, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I think we are just fighting the progress of development. And that's why my answer to this is very simple. The Prophet said, Al-Islamu salihun li kulli zamanin wa makan. And tell me if I'm wrong. Islam is always accommodating to time and space. So we don't need Western ideas to make us develop and to rethink our ideology. It is so unfortunate that only two ideologies reign supreme in the Middle East. One is the secular ideologies that had failed after 7 decades, as the communist regimes had failed after 7 decades. And the alternative was Islamic fundamentalism. And now if we go back to history and to current history, what are we witnessing today? Are we witnessing a different ideology? No. In Egypt we have the Sisi. He came back. How is he more different than, the army and Mubarak and what have you? I mean, in terms of ideology and ideas. There's no difference. So it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. We haven't seen the dramatic changes. I think change in the Middle East is instilled in the youth. I think the technology, the networking, the internet, are the driving force towards change in the Middle East. We cannot keep on thinking about emulating Western democracies by creating fake parliaments and talking about elections when those elections are totally rigged. Have you seen somebody elected in the West 99.999%? But I can be proud to say my president, Mahmoud Abbas, was elected by less than 60%. If we talk about genuine democracy, let's start with Palestine. And let's not forget that the essence of conflict in the world, and let us not derail from this basic fact, it's not September 11. It's the non-resolution of the Palestinian question, ladies and gentlemen. Look at all these Islamic fundamentalists. What excuse do they make when they commit an act of terror in the name of Palestine? Because they use the Palestinians as their only facade to justify their ulterior motives. So the non-resolution of the Palestinian problem will constitute a basic factor for what we are witnessing today in terms of terrorism. Who likes terrorism? Guerrilla fighters in the past, today are present terrorists. It's so unfortunate. When we were fighting occupation, we became terrorists as Palestinians. But when the French resisted the Germans, les batailles du Rhin, they were called resistance fighters, right? So who controls the semantics of what is a revolution, what is terrorism, and what have you? Are there clear definitions for such acts? So as we know exactly to use the yardsticks of measuring who is using terrorism, who is defending or resisting any kind of oppression? The failures of reforms in the Middle East, the failure of the solution of the Palestinian problem, the high illiteracy rates in the Middle East, the lack of development, the lack of awareness, all these are objective factors that have been triggered as a result of the invasion of the United States to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and the saga still continues. 15 years, ladies and gentlemen, and still America is using the same cliches of September 11. Let us not put a balance sheet now and look what terrorist countries today in the world mostly are the democratic countries, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't need the Americans to preach the converts. We know exactly what we want and what our objectives are. And I tell you from this podium that we, the Palestinians, are ready to continue to sacrifice until we will get our freedom and independence. Maybe symbolically we are represented now as observers in the United Nations, but believe me, Israel every day is becoming isolated diplomatically. And today, if there is still BDS on settlement products, I believe that the BDS started in Cardiff when I was participating in that big rally, and I gave a fiery speech against Israel being the most apartheid country in the world. And I think BDS is going to carry not on settlement products, but on boycotting Israel at all levels. And when we went to Cardiff, we wanted to boycott Israel from playing at Wales football, because you know that team epitomizes an occupying force, ladies and gentlemen. And Americans are the ones who should deduce their lessons of September 11, and not we, the Palestinians, or the Arabs, or the Muslim community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think you have heard a professor, and when a professor speaks, it is very difficult to not. Khalid Mahmood, please, there's a seat for you on the top table. I know MPs, where they should sit. Yeah, I know. And welcome, Khalid Mahmood. I've got Ravinder Singh Sohalji from India, who fought an election on the Congress ticket, and he's a great supporter of human rights. Also, I welcome Shakir Qureshi and Syed Mustafa Rabbani from Pakistan High Commission. Thank you very much. At the end, I will say a few more thank yous, but now let me introduce you to the next speaker, who is our keynote speaker tonight. And I think you all know, but let me say just a few words about her. She is a nurse. She became the first woman, actually, as a chairwoman of Conservative Party. She was the first Muslim to be raised to that point. She was first British Pakistani Muslim to be foreign minister and dealing with Middle East and Asia. And I think on the point of very principle, and I think there might be some people who disagree with me, that it would have been better if she was a minister than she resigned, but I think she has given us a lesson and a confidence that British, Muslim, Pakistanis and migrants are not only opportunists or stick with the seats, but when it comes to the principle, they resign early. She resigned on the principle of Gaza as a foreign minister. Can I invite Sayyida?
Well, thank you very much, Mustafa, for that incredibly warm welcome, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 2 days from now, it will be September the 11th, and by coincidence, I will be traveling to the United States. So I can imagine an interesting moment at immigration. But when people say that a single event can change their life, I want to today give a very personal account of how I think consequences flowed for me from September the 11th, and how in many ways it changed what I ended up doing. I was a lawyer. I had my practice in West Yorkshire, and I spent most of my 20s being an activist on the issue of race. When I was growing up, when we were at university, what radicalized you was the colour of your skin. What defined you was the colour of your skin, and how we defined ourselves was as black Brits, whether we were Asian or British. Was almost, or black British was irrelevant, but we defined ourselves through what we saw had happened in the US, and moments like the release of Nelson Mandela from Robben Island were quite big influential moments in my generation's life. But I think September the 11th changed things quite starkly, and certainly from an identity perspective. I think many of us who felt that we were comfortable or started to become comfortable as Asian people in Britain or black people in Britain certainly were defined through our religion, and we were no longer Asian and British, but we were now Muslim and British. And in many ways I took the easy route. I wasn't sure that I wanted to fight the battles on equality and racial justice all over again. And so in 2001, not long after September the 11th, I spoke to my business partner. I, over time, over 6 months, persuaded him to buy me out. I sold my legal practice, I packed my bags, and I left Britain. And in 2002, not to believe what some of the neoconservative commentators will tell you, I was not being radicalized in Pakistan. I was spending a year out, and I went to the only other place where I thought I could try and make some sort of a home, and that was back to the district where my parents originated from when they migrated here over 50 years ago. And having spent some time in Pakistan, it was when I came back that I was talent spotted in 2003 at a Conservative Party conference, and well, the rest is history. And I think in many ways my political career would not have happened had September the 11th not happened, because I'm not sure I would have felt the need to play my part. But I think as we saw the consequences of what flowed from September the 11th, it became apparent that this was not an issue that was going to be around for a year or even 10 years, but actually it was going to be a generational fight in terms of what multiple identities meant and how we saw ourselves as individuals within those multiple identities. Now, the lessons of 9/11, I think we will discuss for many, many years to come, and we all look forward to the Chilcot Inquiry and the findings of the Chilcot Inquiry to find out whether the basis of why we went into Iraq was right, was legally sound, and the consequences that flowed from that. But having served at the heart of the Foreign Office allowed me to learn many lessons, but two very specific ones. And probably I take a slightly different view from the speakers that you've heard so far. And that's this, that not all the countries around the world are ever our permanent enemies, and not any of the countries around the world are ever our permanent friends. And foreign policy is an ever-changing place. I don't think any of us could have predicted the stage that we are now with Iran. If we had looked at this maybe a decade ago, we wouldn't have thought it was possible. And the second lesson, which, and I repeat this quite regularly when I think you mentioned sort of conspiracy theories earlier, not everything in the world was caused by the West or by Britain, and not everything in the world can be fixed by the West or Britain. I think it's sometimes very lazy for us to come to these quite simple assumptions, where if it wasn't for Britain having done this, or if only Britain did this, then everything would be fine. And I've yet to find a country in the world whose values and principles aren't at all times tempered by the concept of self-interest. I think as a young person you can be quite idealistic, and you can have views that certain countries around the world have these deep principles and values, and they surely must make all the right foreign policy decisions. Foreign policy is about pragmatism, and it's about countries acting in their own self-interest at any one point in time. So you could say, well, in light of that, why did I feel the need to resign? Surely I could have said, well, this is a pragmatic position that a country has taken, and it's in my country's self-interest to be at this place and at this policy position at this moment in time. I strip it back to this. For me, having accepted that pragmatic approach to foreign policy making, I have a very clear view that whatever my values and ideas and there are and the principles that I have, the one issue that should underpin foreign policy making, and I spoke about this at the time of my resignation, is this, that we should say what we believe, and we should do what we say. They're very simple tests for me. I have no issue in saying our belief is that we do not like people who are black. If that is a position, it's an appalling position, it's a morally unacceptable position, but if that is what we believe, I have no issues in saying that is what we believe. And therefore we will make life difficult for everybody who is black. Because that is being true to yourself. What I cannot think is a sustainable position is what we don't say what we believe, and we don't do what we say. And at the time, for me, in terms of my role at the Foreign Office, I was the Minister responsible for human rights, I was the Minister responsible for the International Criminal Court, I was the Minister responsible for the United Nations. And the principles that I was utterly committed to, and I felt that the United Kingdom was committed to, was the issue of human rights, international accountability, and the rule of law as cornerstones of what we did in foreign policy. And certainly I felt that they were, and I expressed them as being the cornerstones of our foreign policy. And yet I found in each of those, they didn't underpin our positioning on Gaza. A commitment to human rights, and yet silence on the violations of them. A commitment to international justice, but not being prepared to support membership of or accountability for any crimes that may have been committed. And a commitment for the rule of law, but the constant lack of consequences following ever-expanding settlements. And I think for that reason I felt that clearly what we were saying was not what we believed, and what we were doing was not what we were saying. And at that moment I had a choice, and I hear what the chair said in relation to, would it have been right to stay, or would it have been was it right to go? For me, the decision simply turned on this. I no longer had faith and belief in the position that we took, and I no longer had trust in the system to believe what it was saying. And every day I was having to stand up in the House of Lords and I was having to repeat lines which I fundamentally did not agree with. So, to put it very bluntly, I was lying at the dispatch box. Hansard is a permanent record of what government and government ministers and individually what we think at any one point. It should be an accurate record of history and goes back many, many decades. And yet that Hansard that I was creating by standing up at the dispatch box every day was in fact a lie. And at that point I felt I had no alternative but to be both true to history and true to myself, and the only way to do that was to step away and make clear that my position was different to the position of the government, and that I felt that the government's position was morally indefensible. So have we learned any lessons post 9/11 is a question that we pose. I mean, the academics could discuss this for many, many years, and I presume produce PhD theses off the back of that. If I can, rather than say lessons, can I say what I think some of the consequences that have been positive and negative? I think the negative consequence that we've seen from 9/11 is that there's been a greater retreating of countries into nation states at a time when before 9/11 people felt that boundaries were coming down. I think there was a general sense that actually boundaries have gone back up again, and we can see that both in relation to the Europe debate and the EU referendum debate. There has definitely been a rise in religious hate crime. At a time when we felt a more globalised world would mean we would all know each other better, in an unusual way. Having got to know each other better, there's now been a subsequent rise in a division amongst communities and a rise in religious hate crime. And we've specifically seen in a report only a few days ago in the United Kingdom where we've seen a 70% increase in Islamophobic attacks. There's been an increase in the surveillance culture, not just here but around the world, where privacy, the space where we have private lives is ever encroached. And there's been a rise of multiple versions of non-state actors. So we went after the non-state actors, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. We had some success in tempering their rise, but I think we also saw over time a rise in non-state actors, and ISIS are the latest example of that. However, I do think there's been something positive as well that's come after that. I think the Arab uprising, and I always call it the Arab uprising, is a positive moment and will continue to be a positive moment, whatever the challenges we face in the short term. It is about people in those countries saying we will no longer tolerate the way in which we are being governed. And I don't think it's over and will not be over for a long time. A rise in social media and voices that previously were not heard are now heard. And again, I think this has been one of the developments, and we saw it used effectively during the Arab uprising. And we're also seeing democracy at play in terms of when a country intervenes and when it doesn't intervene. I think the lack of a Syria intervention, the need for Parliament to approve interventions, both here and in the US, I think is much more stark now because of what happened immediately after 9/11 and the Iraq invasion. And a greater demand for transparency. I think that the publics are no longer prepared to just believe what their leaders tell them. I think post-Iraq and post-9/11 and then post-Iraq, I think there is a greater thirst for the public to demand much more from their leaders before they're prepared to commit troops and commit countries to war. And I see that as a positive thing. I see that as democracy in action. So I don't see it as all doom post 9/11. I always say that every challenge is an opportunity. It's a moment, certainly, when I think, as a British Muslim, it's my generation's opportunity to shape what the world will look like, including what Islam will look like in Britain and in Europe. It's an exciting time. I think we're no longer tied to some of the dogma of previous generations. I think we are much more comfortable with our multiple identities, and we're still finding our way through that. But I see a real optimism and positive coming out of all of this, because in all the craziness is increased awareness, increased questioning, increased discussion, and I think overall, in the end, it will lead to an increased and better world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the second last book Tony Benn wrote before his death last year, it was his letter to his grandchildren. And he gave it to me before it was published and circulated publicly. And his main lesson was that he apologized from his grandchildren. He said, we are leaving the world which you don't deserve. We have not made this world better than we took over from our grandparents. But you have the resources, you have the information, you just need a will to change it. So let's carry on with this positive note from Baroness Warsi that we are going to change the world to make it much more peaceful, much more better, and we take all the positive things you said and we learn lessons from our speakers. Now is turn to you to ask a question or a comment. You have to be brief, say your name, and at the end, I think first a question or comment should come from the top table, and Khalid Mahmood will conclude the meeting at 8 o'clock. So can I ask, first of all, like Qurban Hussain is also vice chairman, or do you want to leave it till then? Thank you very much. He said, I'm here today listening to your speakers and learning more. So anybody want to say something or ask a question? Yes, Abdi. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rashad, for giving me this opportunity.
Say your name and...
Yeah, my name is Abdurrahman Mahdi. I come from Ogaden, and I'm Somali. I'm very, very, very really touched by today to see Baroness Warsi, and we appreciate your courage. We believe you stood for moral right, and we all stand by you. I'm British also, and actually you voiced my views on that issue. Thank you very much. Having said that, we live in a world today, actually, what we can say, the world was changing for the better for the last few hundred years. Actually, in ideas, there has always been the Second World War, all those difficulties, colonialism, everything, my first World War, all that. But the main thing was there was a positive ideas going from the world. From the beginning, for the last, let's say, we came from empires, from the Roman Empire, from other empire, we came to republics. The world was changing for the better. That was the general belief. Colonialism it was changing. There was some liberation in all parts of the world. But unfortunately, now what's happening now, we are regressing back to barbarism, to the law of the jungle. And I hope humanity will stand together against that. Because the world, as we all know, we are the determinants of our futures, regardless of whatever we believe. And we can make this world better. And I hope all humanity will work toward that.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gulab, thank you.
My name is Fakar and I represent Harmony Interfaith. There is some discussion
Excuse me.
confronting terrorists.
Another 25 minutes, not much.
I can't see much point in confronting a 15-year-old who is going to fight there. We need to think about the process of radicalization or the circumstances which led to that transformation. And secondly, nobody mentioned about the big proxies who's fighting the war in the Middle East. Some super rich, super conservative countries supporting their beliefs, their opposition trying to take control of Middle East, and American and the Western trying to support Western or making Middle East more unstable, Pakistan trying to keep its own dominance in Central Asia or Indian subcontinent, but nobody mentioned about that proxy war, which is funding both by money and ideology.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The young man, I think two more questions and then I'll come to speaker to comment. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Gorinda. I've recently started working for the APPG for International Freedom and Belief. Dr. Chima and Professor Hussain, you both kind of mentioned about this politics of fear, the clash of civilizations you mentioned, and you talked about this whole idea of us versus them and the West versus Islam. So my question is, what can we do, what can parliamentarians do to try and overcome this quite dangerous narrative that's around?
Well, it's
Thank you. Just I will go and then respond and then I'll come to you.
Mohammed Tariq Kokar. Thank you very much, Mr. Rashid. My question is more urgent nature, which you have to cast mind on this. I feel enough is enough what's happening in Syria. Whatever Britain is doing, whatever America is doing, or Russia is doing, we know the politics. We have come to this stage, which we have learned through many stages and pivots and different. Put it short, can Baroness Warsi, with her influence on Pakistan, ask Pakistan to put a no-fly zone in Syria?
Thank you. Can I ask Dr. Chima, you go first. I think you can stand up and speak or sitting.
No, I think I will be okay while sitting here. Responding to the gentleman's question there, this is what I raised. That unfortunately the model we have adopted specifically in Britain is again a model which doesn't make the bridge, rather it creates a wall. That the Islamic extremists, the Islam, the Muslims. So that sort of environment unfortunately is now created. We have to bear that in mind. But as I said in my speech, that's not going to help any one of us. As I said in the conclusion of my speech, all of us, Britain is a home to many nationalities, many countries, various cultures, and we celebrate that. But we need to come together. We can't expect everything from the government. They can tag us whatever they want to tag us as, because they have their own political agenda. And obviously they play the politics of fear for certain reasons. But it's the community again, it's the people, and that's why we need to have more interfaith. We need to celebrate multiculturalism, which is not being celebrated at the moment. Our Prime Minister thinks that multiculturalism has failed in this country, which I believe hasn't, and we are pushing for integration. And you can't integrate people by pushing them. It's a gradual process which comes when community stands together. So that's what we need to do. Stay together as communities, defend each other. We are friends. If someone is from a different faith, stand with your Muslim friends, and likewise we stand with other communities. The second question, the second question which gentleman raised here about Pakistan to impose. Pakistan has fought unfortunately many proxy wars in the past, and we are bearing the results of those proxy wars. We went in Afghanistan, we helped America there to get rid of USSR, and all what we face today is due to those proxy wars. Pakistan, I wish would have played that role, but I think Pakistan is not in a position, because Pakistan has its own turmoil. We are fighting against terrorism, and we should focus there rather to go to some other country to create a new no-fly zone. I think these nations, UK, US, are more empowered. And I think if they can go to Iraq or they can go to Afghanistan and have try to invent a military solution, why can't they go and hit ISIS in the way it needs to be hit? So this is over for all. That's what I said. It's very unfortunate that we don't find any standards here. We are supporting the authoritarian rules in Middle East because they can give us the oil. When we change that, we'll create a better world.
Thank you very much. Can I thank the media who has given us quite a lot of time today. They are usually not that patient that they give you 2 hours. Today, the media has given us all 2 hours. Very senior journalists are sitting here. I'm very thankful to them. I'm also thankful to Nahid Diyat and Yaslim, who has traveled all the way from Reading, Divya Surti, who has traveled from Birmingham, and many other people. I really thank you all. But I think we can go for another round, but very brief, please. And then there will be discussion. You can have a discussion. Yes, Amir Abdo, thank you very much. From Sindh. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Amir Abdo. I'm running a charity about education in Sindh. But this is a political question from Madam Saida. That a few years ago, Hillary Clinton, she said in a speech in a Congress that we used Wahhabi brand of Islam to create Al-Qaeda and to ousted the Russians from Afghanistan. So this is a sample that they created Al-Qaeda, and we call it a democratic state, that they created Al-Qaeda for their Western interests. So how far you think that ISIS is also created by them to ousted Bashar, Assad al-Bashar? This is my question.
Thank you. Any other question? Sandra? Sandra said to me, yes, I'll come to you, Sandra. It is very welcome. A woman is asking a question. All men have asked. Sandra. Yeah. Sandra is the chairwoman of Executive Committee of Third World Solidarity and also founder member of Third World Solidarity. I'm thankful to her. She's herself a journalist. Very significant. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you all for your comments tonight. Quite enlightening. And I would like to say that with Dr. Hassian, I agree, I wholeheartedly, as we do at Third World Solidarity, commend the work of Palestine. And we say that once we solve Palestine, we will knock the clout out of a lot of the extremists. We should have done it years before. And my question is to Bernice Warsi. I do commend your comments, what you have said in the past and what you're saying today. And I wonder, because I've heard you speaking about the crisis with the immigrants, the history of it, and your ideas about it. What influence do you have with government today? Because it would be great if your voice is heard the way I've heard it.
Thank you very much. Shakir Qureshi, Muslim League Noon plus Karwan Fikr, yes. A journalist, media man.
My name is Shakir Qureshi. I'm here today on behalf of Karwan Fikr, chairman. My question is in fact a concern, and maybe you agree or disagree, but most of you, I know that you will not like it. None of us, we will not change anything. The lesson we have learned is that any time something can happen. 9/11 can happen, it can happen somewhere else as well. In near future, like Afghanistan, Tora Bora can happen somewhere else. Nobody can do anything. So many shrines, the Muslims, Shias, Sunnis have been destroyed. Nobody could do anything. Palestine, anytime it can raise, anytime it can go down. Nowadays, nobody talking about Palestine. Kashmir, anytime it can raise, anytime it will stop. India-Pakistan war, anytime it will start, the people who want to start it, they will start. None of us will do anything, could do anything, unfortunately. Lesson what I have learned. Like Osama bin Laden, his family, their sources, everybody telling that he has died, natural death, but he came out from Pakistan. Those who want to do it, they did it. Now he has been destroyed, dumped into sea. After a few months, he will came out from sea, and nobody could do anything. Nobody will stop it. I want to insist that in near future in Saudi Arabia something will happen. Nobody will do it. I can insist, I can assure you that something is going to happen in Iran. Nobody will stop it. Nobody could stop it. Some people like Tony Blair and other people, they will come up and say sorry, or they will bring up some truth like the doctor in our country, weapons of mass destruction, who came up with the truth, he was killed. And nobody could say anything even in this country. And same thing will happen, it will happen. And even sitting in this parliament, the mother of democracy, we will not do anything. We could not do anything. It will be only the blame game.
Thank you very much, Shakir Qureshi sir. I'm going to ask Dr. Chima to respond and then Bernice Warsi, because there were a couple of questions asked. Anybody else want to ask anything or comment? I think after Shakir Qureshi, nobody should say anything. He said already that we can't do nothing. But we are doing something and we will carry on doing something.
I think there were some direct questions from Bernice Warsi, and I think she will be in a better position to respond to those. But I think the comment's not a question. I do believe that we feel that the commoners, the common man, the voter, the people of United Kingdom, people of USA, people of Pakistan are helpless and they can't change the world. I don't believe in that. That's my personal view. I think all this awareness we create, all these things we are talking about, it does influence. And people's power and elected power can change. The recent example is your own British decision of not going for a vote in Syria. You have seen that how people mandate work in the British Parliament when it's voted against the Prime Minister will to go for another invasion in Syria. So it helped. So we shouldn't completely be hopeless. Rather, concentrating on the conspiracies theory that this will happen, Osama will become live. I think a lot of time we waste in conspiracy theories, and those conspiracy theories never help. We need to have a very productive response to these things, and we should believe that although it may make very little difference, but we do matter and we do make difference.
Thank you, Professor, and then I will come to fairness at the end. Is there anything you want to say?
I have a lot to say, but I didn't see any direct questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I will give my time to Baroness Varsi.
Baroness Varsi.
I'm actually going to disagree with you, sir, for a number of reasons. As a lawyer, I believe in seeing evidence for things. It's very easy to, I think two things are very easy. It's very easy to be drawn into a conspiracy culture, but it's also very easy to blame the other and not take responsibility for some of the things that happen. And sometimes one of the things that concerns me within Muslim communities, and certainly British Muslim communities, there's always an excuse for why it's somebody else's fault and why it's happened to them, rather than actually some looking inward at its own self and thinking, what could we have done better? When you're probably aware of this, but in government there are various levels of information. In all governments, WikiLeaks brought this to the attention of everybody. There's information which is available to read. There is confidential information, protected information, secret information, top secret information, UK eyes only information, and you see various levels of information as it comes through. One of the great advantages and privileges of being a Privy Councillor is that you have access to local law. And not just whilst you're in government, but you have access to it outside of government as well. So you may have been aware of the Prime Minister's statement. There was a Privy Council briefing for Privy Councillors who were given information about the background to what happened in terms of the attack in Syria. And when you read all of that, it's fascinating reading, because you kind of feel like it's an onion and you're peeling it back and you're peeling it back and you're peeling it back. And the one thing you do learn, having read that and having read some of the historical documents, is yes, of course, every country will do whatever it needs to do to protect its own interests. But most things that go wrong in government or in governments are mess-ups rather than conspiracies. And I consistently say this, that most countries do not have the time, energy, money or effort to do all the things that sometimes they're accused of doing. And I've been shocked. I mean, I was the Minister with responsibility for Pakistan for nearly 2.5 years. And I was shocked at some of the things we were accused of doing, which we so clearly were not doing. And so part of the kind of job, I think, for politicians is, however popular it may be for me to sit here and give you some great conspiracy theories of what may have happened or could have happened, I honestly think it simply boils down to self-interest. And every country acts in its own self-interest at any one time, whether that's Pakistan, India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, the United Kingdom, the US, they are acting in their self-interest. What we as politicians have to do, and that's why I don't think it's as hopeless as that, is to say, look, there are certain principles of accountability, transparency, the rule of law, human rights, and we should be holding ourselves and other countries accountable against those principles and values. And I think the more we can kind of step away from these, who created ISIS? Is it a creation of? Who created Al-Qaeda? Is it a creation of? Who, I think the more we can step away from that kind of thing and try and find pragmatic solutions. I mean, one of the things we could start with is the issue in relation to British Muslims and what Islam looks like in Britain in 10 years, in 20 years.
Yeah.
And we had a question about radicalisation and what causes radicalisation. Well, there are no clear academic studies which show that there is a single path to radicalisation. There's no linear journey where somebody wakes up and then follows these paths, because if there would be a point where we would intervene. There are a whole series of issues which lead to people going down the route of radicalisation. But I consistently say this, that of course, government will intervene and have its policies in relation to radicalisation. But as communities, are we doing enough? Are we genuinely tackling? And one of the ways I do this is by tackling what I think are views. I mean, I will sit in community meetings where people will say, did you know this? And I say, no, that's complete nonsense. That is not happening. And we do have a responsibility that when we hear views which we clearly know are not true or not likely to be true, however attractive they may sound, we have a responsibility to challenge those views, because I think by not challenging those views, we allow young minds to not respond in a logical, reasonable way as we as adults would do, but actually would react in a way which does take them down the path of radicalisation.
Your Excellency, you want to say?
Thank you very much. Just a quick response about the proxy wars. I think I would recommend, the audience to read the book of C. White Mills, The Power Elite. Let us not diminish the power of the military-industrial complex and the multinational corporations and the international banking system and those organizations that deal with arms. We do understand that regional conflicts are basically being provided, by this complex. I mean, this complexity of the Masons, the Freemasons, and Zionism, and what have you. Let's not just stick it, to Obama or to Bush or what have you. It's much more important than that, and I think something that I have to share with you is the fact that the credit crunch was not the making of terrorists. As a matter of fact, the credit crunch led to terrorists more and more to buy more arms and to create new facts on the ground. So we need to understand who is behind this. It's not a question of conspiracy theory, but this is world politics. It's not vested in one country. And let us just take one simple example. Somebody mentioned Syria. Why all the regimes have fallen in the Middle East except the Syrian regime? You know why? Because the interest of China and the ex-Soviet Union, Russia, is in total contradiction with that of American foreign policy in the Middle East. That's why Bashar al-Assad's regime is still there. Now, they're not talking about ousting him, they're talking about reconciling with him, with the opposition forces. That's a good example for you, that these proxy regimes are being fought, and the ones who are paying the heavy price are innocent Syrians who are now scattered all over the world, going through what I call the journey of pain, and actually, the human beings are paying the heavy price. We are the victims of politics, and politics, my friend, is very dirty. That's why I feel like very soon I will be leaving this post as a diplomat, not as a politician, and try to wash my hands like Jesus Christ washed his hands from the blood of Christ, Pilate did that, and we have to do that, because we cannot really, and I say that very clearly, we cannot trust politicians to solve our problems. It's the people who are going to solve the problems. Going out to the streets, that's very important. And what I witnessed today at 10 Downing Street is a good example that this country is adamantly fighting for the liberation of Palestine, for its freedom. And that's why Netanyahu was not welcome to this country. And we managed to get 107,000 signatories. And it was not accepted in the parliament because the government made a decision that heads of states have diplomatic immunity. But that was, something which is symbolic, it's a gesture. How much, the people have awareness about Palestine, and that process cannot continue forever.
Thank you very much, everybody. I think today's debate and this meeting, I have learned a lot. I hope you have. And while we had a wonderful line of speakers, you saw there were MPs who didn't speak, and I can see a lot of people sitting here who will take your message. Banas Farsibar, Ghulam Fareed is a chairman of Hammersmith Islamic Center. He does a lot of work on Islam. There is a gentleman, Tishale, who is sitting here, who resigned as a Supreme Court judge in Ethiopia on the basis of human rights and corruption. There are many people. Nahid Ayad is the Secretary General of People's Party, women wing of United Kingdom, Sonia sitting here, who is an activist of PTI, and Sajjad Bhatt. And can I ask you, there are new people today here, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all, but if you can kindly either leave your card or your details with Sajjad Bhatt, who is sitting at the back, stand up please, and Kifale, who is a member of Central Executive Committee of Third World Solidarity, that we can carry on working with you for future meetings. And can I announce 2 meetings which are going to happen? One on 27th of October is the meeting on Kashmir, and our debate will be way forward. We are not going to debate and discuss where we are today, what happened in the history. I think we should learn from the history, and we should discuss today, or we should discuss the future as well. And then on 23rd of November, Tuesday, we will have a meeting on human rights and political prisoners in Ethiopia. So can I ask you to give you a big clap to yourself and welcome you again to next meeting. Thank you. And there is a drink at the back if you want it.